Transformer is a new series of moderated panel discussions and learning opportunities focused on how cultural organizations, artists, creative technologists, and others are creating compelling digital experiences, engaging audiences, and building resilient strategies and models for the future. Transformer is curated and produced by Root of Two in partnership with Midtown Detroit, Inc. These convenings engage local, national, and international thought leaders over the course of 6 90-minute online Zoom sessions from April through June 2021. Midtown Detroit, Inc. is leading the Detroit Cultural Center Planning Initiative to reimagine the public space that connects a dozen cultural organizations across an 83-acre site. The initiative is developing a place-based digital strategy for the Detroit Cultural Center, designed to build needed infrastructure, advance institutional transformation, and present new models of visitor experiences empowered by technology.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and good evening. I'm really excited for this third talk. This is really about how we sort of think about the before times, the during times, and what may be coming next after the pandemic in terms of the way that we approach kind of outreach, engagement, and learning. We really sort of think about this from this point of view of what is cross-functional, what is cross-platform, in terms of how do we continue to transform both the relationships that we want to have and hold with our communities, our artists, as well as our colleagues within cultural institutions, and what role can culture really play in sort of leading the way that we actually think about digital transformation holistically. And so we have a fantastic lineup of presenters and speakers tonight. I'm very grateful for all of them to join us. And without further ado, we're going to get started. A few reminders. There is a transcription service if you need it for captioning for tonight's event. Also, keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of information in the chat, but the most important information that's going to be in chat are the kind of questions that you bring to the event tonight. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we really love to make this a dialogue and conversation between our presenters and our gathered audience. And so as you post your question in chat, we will also be communicating with you to see if you want to come on screen and get involved in the Transformer series. So without further ado, we're going to kick things off.
Hey everybody, I'm Lauren Ruffin. I use a she series of pronouns. I'm coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico, home of 19 Pueblo tribes. Who are all still here and still fighting for their sovereignty and for their unceded territories. Besides my full-time job as one of the co-CEOs of Fractured Atlas, a couple of years ago, I started a cooperative called Crux. Crux is really came out of a need to intervene in the inequities that were already forming in the immersive storytelling space, so virtual reality and augmented reality. We did a bunch of community building, really trying to connect Black artists who are working in the space already in the early days with funders who would be interested in supporting their work. Around this time last year, well, I guess now we're a little past this time last year that I'm talking about, but last spring, when the pandemic hit, I happened to be doing a live stream series talking to arts leaders from around the world about what it meant to lead during a pandemic. And in the green room, inevitably, my colleagues were asking, hey, you've been talking about this like digital thing for a couple of years. And, you know, like, do you think you can help us figure out our conference? Or do you have any thoughts on how we might be able to take these exhibits that we've had and brought them on and bring them online? And so the image that's currently shown is one such project where we partnered pretty deeply with Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco on their programming for the last 8 months. And so for this particular experience, we use an immersive platform called Oye, which really allows for a lot of audience engagement and agency. When I started getting these requests, I really started thinking about if Crux were to do this work, what would be the framework we would use? We really started thinking about ethical design in virtual gatherings. So how can we bring some design approaches that were really thoughtful into the space? And some of those design considerations are, you know, what should technology be? What should an experience be online so that your audiences can really be deeply engaged? So really focusing on what are human rights in digital spaces, how do you use technology that really respects your human effort? It should be easy to get into. It should be intuitive. And then finally, like, how can we use platforms that really respect our human experience, where we can be intimate, where we can remain connected, where we can be in community with each other. And some of the questions that we work with clients on are really, how do we get clear about our assumptions? We came into the pandemic with a number of assumptions about our audience, whether that was assumptions about, folks who were 50 and above, their ability to use or interest in using technology, assumptions about what devices people had. So how do we really get clear about those assumptions and figure out what are assumptions that are true and what are assumptions that just don't exist? How do we move from shared space to shared experiences? How can we create experiences online that really create a shared feeling amongst participants, and where we feel like we can be in the same space with some sense of co-presence, with near simultaneous interaction without a whole lot of lag, low latency? How can we use this opportunity, the data that we're able to get from digital experiences, to better understand and engage our audiences? What does our audience really care about? Do they care about our work? Do they really care about interacting with each other? Is it both? And how does being virtual increase our audience or change who our audience might be? A number of the artists and organizations that we've worked with over the last year have fundamentally shifted for the rest of their careers and for the lifespan of their organization, who their audience is. We spent a lot of time talking with our partners about that. And then finally, and probably most importantly, how do we use this moment? And Crux was really, I don't like to use the word fortunate, because it was really, really surreal. But because we're the only organization that's really operating at the intersection of Blackness and digital life explicitly, between the pandemic and the uprising last summer, we found ourselves at a point of tremendous growth. And for us, this opportunity was, how can we encourage our partners to really center their programming at the margins? How does being virtual allow you to co-create programming and get continuous feedback and iteration from a new community that you might not have engaged before? And how do you know that you're ready for that? I'm going to try to share this file with this one pager that might be helpful, that I just sort of walk through verbally. But that's sort of the work that we're engaged in. The practical, some of the data that I threw together a couple weeks ago. We've done 25 events with arts institution partners. We've had close to 70,000 people online in our experiences. They've ranged from less immersive experiences, but highly engaging experiences, like the International Documentary Association's conference, where we had 3,000 people over 5 days. We did 12 hours each day of live stream programming, highly engaged. That event was just like nonstop, round the clock. They have a global audience. To events that have less attendance but more immersion. We've done a bunch of theater, live performance in theater and VR, and then stuff that's in the middle. So we've done work with New York Live Arts, and then some work with YBCA, and we're currently co-creating two pieces with Actors Theater of Louisville, and those are VR theater pieces. So we've been busy, and I'm happy to have this conversation right now. I think it's really timely, and I'm really excited to kick it over to some of my other panelists.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. My name's Heather Norton. I'm the Vice President of Science and Nature now, actually, at Discovery Place, and I work for the premier science institution for the Carolinas. We are a family of museums. We have a science museum, a nature museum, and 2 children's museums. And at the heart of our work, we are highly invested in transformational experiences that are hands-on, that are about active learning. And so what was very interesting going into the pandemic was we had to really grapple with, how does our experiences, how do our museums show up when we're in a digital space? And so for a long time, Discovery Place and other museums have talked about moving more into the digital world, but it wasn't always the right timing, or we weren't quite there. So come last March, the pandemic really kind of forced us to accelerate those efforts. We had a strategy in place, but we were facing shuttered museums. We weren't able to connect with our audiences in the way that we truly feel is impactful. And so we really had to think about this digital space. So what we've been doing over the past year is growing our talent and our comfort with creating these digital experiences. We've had a lot of success learning how to take our classes and our shows that would historically be for our students in K-12 and in after school programs. And we've really taken them into the digital space. So we've been able to really learn, like, how do we still get that engagement with our audiences? How do we participate and do these hands-on things together, even though we're remote? And so we've been doing a lot of work, working with the schools and working with the after-school providers to make programs that really meet their needs. One of the things that we found during the pandemic that was so disheartening was our children lost access to those hands-on learning opportunities. You know, that everything went to the screen and there was a lot of Zoom fatigue. They were really missing those hands-on components. So the team has worked really hard to figure out how can we still provide those hands-on opportunities at home or in their programs while we're the remote person. And so we've been working really hard to bring those to life. I think what's also really interesting is thinking about the different ways we engage with audience segments, because we don't only serve children, we serve adults, we serve families, we serve business leaders. And so how does our digital presence show up differently to meet those different audiences? We were able to successfully run a donor event in the virtual space and able to do that through a variety of different activity and content, bringing in content experts, bringing in hands-on engagement, and just trying to build out programs that are meaningful and engaging and something that feels like it is part of the Discovery Place brand. You know, coming out of the pandemic, I think we've been going through this closing and reopening scenario as the numbers have changed, but we're finally at a position where I think we're seeing the light. Like it seems like we're starting to look at what post-pandemic looks like. And one thing that museums have really started to talk about is we need to be better. We need to do better. And doing better, that means showing up for our communities in ways that are meaningful and relevant for them, that are representative of our diverse audiences and communities. And as was even mentioned in the prior speaker, this co-creation, like how can we really make this about learning together and having it be about topics and areas that are relevant to the individual. So we're starting to look at how this digital engagement will continue to show up, because we know that this is work that we're going to continue to do. It's something that not only allows us to reach new audiences, but it allows us to expand reach in terms of, for those who might have transportation or not be able to afford to come, it provides us different opportunities to engage with our community and really bring science relevance and application to our residents. So it's something we're really excited about. I think in this next phase, we're really looking at digital in terms of things like converting our IMAX so that we can start to host interesting and novel concepts for adult audiences in our buildings. So going from just being in a virtual platform to having digital show up even through in-person experiences. And so I know this is going to be work we continue to do and continue to move forward. So just really excited to be part of the conversation today and hear from others about what they're facing and what they're grappling with, because I know this is shared work and shared experiences that we're all kind of processing and figuring out what is relevant for us as an institution or an organization. So thrilled to be here. I will pass it to my next colleague.
I'm Jane Alexander, and I'm the Chief Digital Information Officer at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And I like how Lauren said that this year was an opportunity, because I believe that too. It was really, museums have a lot to learn in so many levels. And when we closed in March 14th, 2020, we were in the middle of a lot of projects that are that do physical and digital together, and we were really depressed to go home. And by the time we came back on Monday, we said, let's make this an opportunity to think differently, to move quickly, and to see where how we can collaborate better across the museum. The other thing that was really interesting, I mean, people had a lot of ideas, and people who hadn't used digital before, obviously, even as everyone had to work from home. Everyone had our devices. We had to be able to communicate. We had to get our files. People, so people who had to sort of put that up now had to, was an opportunity to get everybody to use our shared drives and Teams and things that we had tried to get everyone. So again, another opportunity. One of the things that I think we had an advantage as is that because we had for the last decade set up a back end and integrated of all our applications, our collection systems, our digital asset management systems. We had an open access program that launched in 2019. We were almost 100% digitized, and those things being put in place let us really think creatively and work together. And we had a lot to learn, and especially with how do we engage all different types of audiences, but we already had a workflow in place of how do we collaborate for digital projects. So we immediately started working with people and partners and just started brainstorming. And one of the first products that we launched, one of the first things is we, I'm borrowing this word, have a vintage website for all the digital and technology we do. And I forgot who said that, but I'm crediting someone on this panel who said that. We had put off doing the website till 2021. And it was an opportunity to say, okay, let's do a takeover page. Everything's going to be digital, how we think. So we redesigned a page that could be for live streaming, for programming, for videos, so people could quickly find and do things. So we only had to really think about that. The rest of the website was what it was, but it was an ability to kind of get these programs up and going. The other thing that was really important to us was being relative and being data driven. So when we first went home, we saw a lot of museums throw up, virtual tours from Google and videos they've had in there, for years, but we really felt like people are struggling right now. And our mission is to create transformative experiences for the benefit of all forever. So we really, we had our curators do 3-minute videos that were about a piece of artwork that one was about loneliness, this famous artist. Another was about, about this warrior and getting his hair cut, because people started to talk about hair cutting. As months came by, we would look at the data, we'd see how long people were lasting, and then we would rethink things. And the museum then started to open. It then closed again in November. We had a hybrid build. People weren't really comfortable. We had social injustice going around the world. How do we bring that in? And so we really also thought there was Zoom fatigue, but back before, there were 2 projects that I just want to quickly call out. One was right away, we realized as workers and people from home, we were missing those water cooler moments, those minutes that art really helped us, why we all were working at museums. And so we created a program, again, using all our back end, that teams all around the world every morning get a prompt. And the prompt had to do what was going on with the world. And it's still going on. And you pick an artwork, and it's kind of like pick an artwork, write your New Yorker caption. At the end of the day, the exhibition runs in your team, and you see what people picked and what they said. I mean, we've had everything from, happy hour at the end of the world to the Mars landing to Melinda and Bill's breakup. I mean, you name it, it's been in the prompt, but it's to keep it light, keep people going. The other thing that I'm really proud of is when schools were in September, people weren't going back to school. Teachers were going to be teaching from home. Families were having their kids. College kids were still not going to be in the dorms. We created with AI, share your view, and it would match with their artwork. And again, it was quick, 5 seconds, and you could dive deeper, but it was a way to engage people and have teachers have a tool that would do new things. So anyway, we've done a lot. We've learned a lot. We have a lot to go, and really thinking about how do we create more relative content was really important to us, but we have so much to learn. So I will pass it now to my other colleague. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Adams. I am the Chief Curator and Director of Programs at the Bemis Center, which is located in Omaha, Nebraska. And Omaha was originally the site of the Umanhan, Ponca, Pawnee, Otto, Missouri, and Iowa peoples. Bemis Center is an international art center focusing on contemporary art. And we also, so we have a residency program, exhibition program, and public programs. And, the pandemic, obviously, thinking about how it's sort of changed our lives over the past 16 months, Bemis was, and I was the person that said we had a vintage website. When everything shut down, we were in the midst of installing an exhibition. We had residents in the house. And so it was quite a tumultuous time. And in 2019, we had launched a sound art and experimental music program that was generously funded by the Mellon Foundation. And after, a few weeks of just sort of trying to kind of figure out exactly what we were going to do, we were also in the midst of hiring a sort of technician to run that program. We were able to quickly change course and start hosting performances online via a website called Twitch, which is actually like a gamer website. But what I really, what was really great about this was that we were able to, pivot is the word that sort of came up earlier, but, we had just opened this beautiful music venue that we had collaborated with so many wonderful people from Omaha to do, and then not being able to host people in person anymore was tough. But what I really love about this aspect of live streaming is that we can obviously still pay artists, which was our number one priority, was to continue to pay all of the artists that had been booked to come, as well as engage new artists, realizing that we could have people from all over the world participate as a performer. We would, even send them equipment if needed be, and we were able to sort of, live stream them from their studio. Or we also were able to work with a lot of local artists. So a lot of artists in the Omaha area, we actually invited them to safely come into the venue and live stream exactly from the venue. And then these were broadcast also onto Twitch and also our Facebook page. And luckily I have an amazing communications director, Davina Schreier, who really works super hard on kind of keeping our socials like very much in the forefront of everybody's mind. So if you've seen any Bemis socials, you'll know about that. But these shows quickly became something that I think our online community greatly expanded very quickly. We're having people, watch from, as you can kind of see here on this slide in the chat, Denver, Massachusetts. We have a lot of people watching from Scotland and Japan. And it's just really great to have this sort of chat function, which really creates community, because what I realize now is when you're in person in a show, sure, you might like turn to your friend and say, oh, this is such a great song, or this was such a great thing. But this is a way to really exchange information in a different way. Oh, I've seen this person perform here and here. Oh, I've supported their Bandcamp. And that was really something that we didn't realize was going to happen. And I think that was really important for us. We also, of course, did quickly do a lot of sort of panels and talks with our artists and residents that were in the house at the time, as well as our exhibiting artists, and sort of just really trying to keep, again, keep artists paid and keep, our engagement with our community, going in that way, and obviously in a very different way until we could reopen in person safely in July, but of course, still doing a lot of digital programs. And we were able to launch a new website, a new brand in January of 2021. So basically almost about a year after, but that has really changed the way that we are communicating, I think, with the world. Our website was very vintage and didn't really have any interactive elements. And now we're really just able to showcase everything that's happening. We can live stream exactly like from our homepage. And so that's sort of a new feature that we're really interested in. But yeah, continuing, as things are slowly changing again, and we're recentering, knowing that we're going to have more people in the building, knowing that we still have this now greater audience. Our audience has, completely changed in terms of who's been interacting with us. So making sure that we can still cater to them, and they can still count on us for programming, which I think is really important. So we will be continuing to live stream all of our public programs for the foreseeable future. I don't really see that changing. It's definitely something that I know funders are really excited to know that, we can have people in person again, of course, safely, and we can be live streaming out, via Twitch or YouTube in order to continue the great work and showcase the amazing artists that we work with every day.
So we are moving into discussion. I'm going to cue everyone to start getting your questions in the chat, because we really do want to make sure that we're able to sort of bring you into the dialogue. But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. Those were great perspectives. And if I could just sort of sum up, the thing that I found really compelling was the way that you all centered the kind of audiences that you were trying to reach, and with like a lot of care, a lot of humility, and a lot of like everything from very customized bespoke sort of, services and resources to, having to customize the off-the-shelf technology. So with that, I think my first questions really are like, could you talk a little bit about like what it was to try and like build and find kind of resources to do this work initially? I know, this ranged from we have to pivot, that 2020 and 2021 word, to those that, had the benefit of really sort of pre-planning. So I think this way of sort of thinking about resources is where I kind of want to start the dialogue today.
Well, I can just jump in really quickly. I think that, at Bemis, we just really we have a small team, and we really work really well together. And so immediately realizing that we could just quickly do, obviously things like Zoom. We were already using Zoom, which is kind of funny. I feel like I didn't know Zoom before I came to Bemis, and now I'm obviously an expert, but knowing that we could utilize Zoom for panels and lectures and things like that, but automatically also just using like things like Instagram, and just using what we had to kind of get things started and just continue to have things, for our audience to engage with. Our first thing that we actually did was we had an artist in residence who was literally at Bemis hold a very sad dance party. And we did that with the Viralis Center in New York. And so the two of us worked with Jesus to create this Zoom, the first Zoom dance party that I had been to, where he DJ'd, and we had to get our Ethernet boosted. We had to sort of do all these little things that we had, hadn't thought about before. We got Zoom hacked, and all of these things were just happening, and sort of learning from that first initial event, which I think was March 28th. So that was pretty quickly after we had closed, to now where, we had hired our sound tech in April, and immediately, because of, who he is, he was like, oh, I know someone that does live streaming as their, job. Maybe he'll moonlight for us. And so now we have this really great local artist who's been live streaming all of our events for us and brings all of these cameras. And, it's just a really great way for us. Again, a big part of our mission is to to be able to showcase and pay people. So both artists and, especially local vendors. So now that we can work with, his name is Alexander Hamilton, great name, obviously. It's been a game changer for that as well.
Yeah, I would just share, for us, we were not prepared for the rapidness in which we were having to move into this space. So our first few months of content was done on staff's cell phones at their homes, in their backyards. We were using the types of lights you can get off Amazon. It was very much a rudimentary setup that we were doing, but we were getting content out and we were trying to engage. And then it's evolved. We were able to get some funding and some resources and supports to help us really outfit a really nice space. So we have a digital studio now. And so I think even seeing the transformation of what we started doing to what we've been able to do, I don't think the team even gives themselves proper credit, because we all talked about, think of the things we can add to our LinkedIn profiles now. Now I'm a video mixer, and I'm a digital producer, and I'm all these things because we wear so many hats. And so I think that's been really amazing to think back on and give ourselves a little bit of credit for how far we've come, given where we started. But then I think also saying but we're nowhere near where we want to be. This is a good progress step, but we still have work to do, and we still need to continue to invest in this offering. So I think I can certainly look back and see a very different trajectory from, March to where we are today. And it's been an amazing investment of the team's talents and community resources to help us get there.
On our end with Crux, I think part of it's just personality. I'm not someone who spends a whole lot of time thinking before I jump. And I was, we didn't exist this time last year at all. It was me and one other person. And it really, the work we did spun up, like literally because I had a bunch of Black digital creatives who had been laid off from large companies, from Disney. And then I had a bunch of friends and colleagues who ran arts organizations who needed something. And I was like, well, can I put these two groups together just to be helpful? And, we did a couple of experiences last summer, and that sort of snowballed. And all of a sudden, we're 18 people and probably going to do close to $2 million worth of business this year. But I can't say that it was a thoughtful process. But Heather, I really, that piece around the benefit of just jumping in with a team to do, and I think we're in a sector that does not do that very often. We spend a lot of time researching and thinking and planning, and plan A, plan B, plan C. And all that does is build anxiety and sort of breed this culture of perfection that's really not helpful and is actually pretty toxic. And I love hearing you talk about the content that's really most relevant in 2021. And even before that, and younger people know this, is everybody wants to do a Blair Witch, what we would call Blair Witch, is the shit that made us sick in the movie theater. A shaky, video, are literally changing the world. And so I love that description around just the rapid upskilling and muscle building that your team did over the course of last year. And I do think, the next 3 to 6 months is a good time to pause and say okay, so we've done all of this. Let's throw a party for what we've done. And then how are we going to just keep building this muscle and not let it atrophy over time? But I mean, I don't tell people that this was at all a thoughtful thing for Crux. This was not work we were supposed to be doing. And, we've still got growing pains as a cooperative. And, one of the few actual cooperatives working in the space with broad-based ownership and really trying to embed our principles throughout everything we do. But yeah, so, that might not be as helpful in terms of resources. It's just sort of jump and then figure out how you're going to pay for it later. And my credit cards are still recovering.
I think I kind of forgot the question exactly because we kind of covered everything again.
So I think we were really trying to dive in or noodle a little bit on this kind of question of how did you find the resources? How did you build the resources? Some of it had the benefit of, as you said already, already being in this space and sort of planning for this world. But I think that was the twin whiplash of, oh shoot, we've got to be digital now. And holy crap, how am I going to do this with a team? How am I going to find the resources? How are we going to dig in and make this happen?
So we have an advantage and a disadvantage. Our advantage was we have been known for the last decade as being a digitally innovative museum that really has transformed the way you think about digital and in museums and how it can engage audiences. And the advantage was we had the back end in place. We had already pushed through a lot of things. We had a system in that, how do you make different derivatives? We all had to pivot on what projects you're working and pick up little school. We didn't ever make as many videos as we did this year, but we also didn't want to just focus on videos. The other thing though, that was great was we had weekly digital meetings cross-departmental where we looked at analytics, visualizations using our Tableau. Again, we had those things in place, so we had that advantage. But we were people are why are we doing 1 hour membership parties? People drop off at 34 minutes. Let's move them to 30. People don't want to hear that, but we kept showing data, and you can't get organizations sometimes to look at it and try something new. And the other thing was really being relative. So once in July, when museums could open up and stuff, we didn't want curators from home doing videos about, we changed our series all the time, even to currently where we're opening up new galleries and we're doing 1-minute videos on contemporary art. But it changed throughout. We had different series. We decided upfront, it would sunset. We would only do 6, or we would only do 4, because it is that thing of, well, everyone, you just do more and add more, and then the quality goes. So this is really now interesting in that we really did bring a lot. Our numbers, everything in the museum, obviously, we didn't have as many people come. All our numbers are down. Our membership was down, everything. Our collection online, after a huge year of open access, I was like 68% increase. Internationally, more hits than ever before. More 153% download our entire collection, our open access. And our YouTube channel went up 54%. And, that was something that we didn't ever really even focus on. So it was great seeing these numbers and seeing what worked and went in. And now here we are in this hybrid mode a little bit. And what did we learn that we're going to take on? And what are we going to kind of say? I know everybody's like, well, we're going to, and I know there's positives of, we're going to still live stream these live events and have both. But some events don't lend itself to be that a good program. And it's really hard to say, like, it's a great program, but if we really want to focus on the on-site right now, that is to do that right. Do we want to do something differently? And then there's other things, like, we know how to do this easily. We can totally stream this, and it's a great lecture that gets filled up, and now we can give it to our community for free. So we're going through it, and I love to hear kind of what the rest of the people are doing.
Yeah, I think that's so timely a thought in terms of, like, not only, and I'm seeing some of the things in chat around, like, not only how are you sort of partnering differently inside of teams, how are you sharing information, how are you, like, scaling up, but I'm also wondering in terms of the way that, maybe you all have partnered differently with others outside of your institution, whether they be individual artists or smaller collectives, or even if you're part of a smaller collective, smaller team, the way that you might be partnering with, like, larger institutions. I think partnership is such a facet of what we're trying to do within the Cultural Center Planning Initiative, that it'd be great to hear your reflections on, how this became a shared struggle, perhaps, or sort of shared lift in terms of just how you operated digitally differently.
Well, I think, we do obviously a lot of individual partnerships with, artists that we're working with. But one thing that sort of came up during the pandemic was the Museum of Art and Design in New York, and has also sort of a studio artist in residence program. And we realized that we shared several alumni that had gone through both of our programs. And so and that came through a resident that was here during the pandemic, Paolo. And so it made a lot of sense for us to partner on a series where we kind of highlighted those 5 or 6 alums. And we did a sort of 2-part series, one with the curator from MAD and one with myself, where we talked with those alums and sort of shared their current work, shared about their both experiences being sort of an on-site resident at MAD, as well as living at Bemis for 2 to 3 months resident, and sort of, and obviously what they were working on, during lockdown. And so that was really great, because I don't think that necessarily would have kind of come up, and we wouldn't have been able to really do that program if something like this, didn't happen. And of course, we shared the cost of paying the artists to, participate. And so that, was kind of a great way to, again, like, partner with them. It's definitely something that I think we'll consider doing in the future with other, residencies or other spaces, because our alumni program is really something that's very important with us. And we had to sort of obviously shake some things up. We usually do convenings where we go to different cities that we have large groups of alums and sort of do studio visits and bring people there. And we obviously couldn't do that last year. We were supposed to go to Mexico City and to Chicago. So we're trying to think of different ways to continue to highlight our alumni, as well as what's actually happening within our walls right now. So.
Yeah, we did a weird thing last summer. And again, just trying to, like, pay people where, Blair Russell, who was one of the producers of, if you're in theater, you might know Blair. Blair was one of the producers on Slave Play, has done a lot of theater work. sort of hit me up on LinkedIn. I didn't know him, and was like, let's do some, like, he loves VR. And he was like, let's do some VR theater. And I was like, okay. So we commissioned, 3 Black female playwrights and grabbed a bunch of Black actors and threw them into VR and like just mounted this, 3 cool pieces in VR. What we learned from that is, there's an audience for this. Because we, again, like, moved quickly, we didn't go through the traditional process that theater does. We just did it because I don't know theater. I just didn't know any different. And what was interesting was the audience was both folks who were traditional VR folks, but we had a huge number of people out of the gaming space who had VR headsets who joined. And we ended up selling out 4 shows, which was like, we didn't advertise or anything. And so that to me is like another opportunity that sort of, if you're working in a medium, which has, I've learned in my other theater projects that we're doing now, that like there's actually pretty rigid structures and timelines and roles. And, but there's an opportunity to sort of break all of that down and just do the thing really quickly, to really maximize and learn and like really, really quickly iterate, get to MVP and just test out ideas. Our next test with this will be ticketed experiences. And ultimately, that partnership should lead to really, really interrogating the structure of how theater is made, both in terms of the finite number of tickets that are sold, but also like bringing in new audiences. Like I love that Rachel, you're doing stuff on Twitch. To me, there's like, when you're thinking about these platforms that are outside of our traditional mediums, and the amount of money that's flowing into those platforms right now into the creator economy, sort of doing these crossover experiences makes a lot of sense. I totally agree with you, Jane, around like not everything needs to be live streamed. But for those experiences where, taking a breath to think, is this a scene that would do really well in a different medium of this experience? Is this an exhibit that would look great not only on a wall, but as an AR experience or as a hologram? So I mean, those are the sorts of partnerships that like I'm really excited to keep building on.
We have Anne-Marie joining us with a question for the group.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the demographics of the new visitors that you may be attracting with your digital programming. I mean, for example, what have you found to be like the sweet spot, for example, for attracting maybe more senior populations versus Gen Z? And then the second part of the question is, how are you maintaining your relationship with these new visitors into the future? How are you keeping them engaged moving on? And what are some of the best maybe platforms or just techniques that you're using to stay in touch with these new visitors? Thank you.
We really did think about multiple audiences. From, of course, like philanthropy is like, how are we going to get memberships if like everything's online free? We had our families that were the community around us that we hadn't been able to always get. How do we engage them and really, give them the tool sets that will attract and interest them? And so we did, and digital natives. Digital natives are on their phones all the time. Why are they going to come to our website unless they have a paper or something due? And even then, how do we let them know that you can get info from us to do that paper? So we really did, we don't believe content's for everybody. I mean, you find things and stuff. So for members, they got the content first through these like weekly letters, and it didn't go out on social media till that, next Tuesday. When we did this, our, first of the month dance party, we were like, how are we really going to get people? Are people even going to come at 7 o'clock? Like the person who was doing it wanted to have it for 3 hours, and we're like, and how do you show it? And the equipment has to be good. The music has to sound good you're only as good as everyone's bandwidth. But so we really took time to put those together. And then we teamed up with the Rock Hall, who's in Cleveland too, who was struggling, who wasn't as digitally advanced, but had some great content that we could take advantage of. So we did local joining of things. We also, we thought about the digital natives. That has been something that when we redid Gallery 1 to Artland's Gallery. So we did Instagram filters, and we, again, took those same prompts that we were putting in the Slack art, but just funnier and faster. And, you had PPP gear, like it was our armor court stuff. And we had, and different things, because we tried to constantly look at what was trending with those people. And we just wanted to bring them in. Everything we did, everything attached to our collection online. That object they talked about, the video you saw, the live show, the Instagram, so that again, you could dive deeper or you could just move on. So that was a couple of things. We had a performing arts team that, as everybody knows, that was the hardest thing to keep going. And we were supposed to have a concert with Courtney Bryan, who's the Rome Prize. She was in the middle of it and was cut short. And we did a series of Behind the Beat. I say that because people didn't like the title, but like Behind the Beat, and and talked about with all these different artists. But Courtney talked about her compositions she was writing and adding on to about social justice, and it was, these things were really powerful because all these different performers were struggling, and what were they doing, and how do you even work in this world? So we did try lots of different things, and families were, education was all over. We need to keep our families. And we would do different art projects. We made a gallery. We still have it, that you can throw your, whatever the project of the week was, you could put your project up there. We made something so people from outside could share things. So it's a little rambly, but we really threw the spaghetti up on the wall, looked at the analytics. And the big thing that I've always done in my 10 years is iterate. We then had a weekly meeting. What's working, what's not working? Let's put that aside and keep moving.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think I was really taken with the Bake Off crossover, I have to say, at one midpoint in the pandemic. Yes. So we have another great question coming from Reggie Woolery, one of our CCPI members.
Hello, everyone. Great presentations. Thank you so much for sharing what you're doing at your organizations. I work at a museum as well. And I wrote this question before the panel, so I think you might have answered it somewhere as you talked about just initial responses to the pandemic and some of the mourning. So my question was, usually learning in space is connected to artifacts and content. Can you share any ideas or examples of social emotional learning in digital or virtual space? Being that, we talked about, Zoom fatigue and the idea of these teachers trying to figure out this new technology and connect it to screens. Anything you've learned that might help us go forward as educators in that space?
I think one thing that we started to lean into was this idea of how can we incorporate mindfulness and recognize the entire person in the space. And so, how do we draw to things that people could access at the time? Like we talked a lot about being outside in nature and the benefits we get from that. And so encouraging people when we were in lockdown through our virtual programs, like to go outside and to enjoy nature and how that can be a benefit. With our youth programs, we did a lot of social emotional work. We have a large youth development program. And so we had all these teens who pretty much were disconnected from us for the entire year. And so we worked actively to create spaces virtually for them to share what they were feeling, how they were processing things, and just be able to have that social dialogue, even though we were not able to meet in person. And so I think we tried to find different mindfulness and social emotional resources that worked in the digital space. The other thing that we were able to draw on is we have a pretty extensive living collection. So we have a lot of animals, and we know that humans feel a lot of connection to animals. And so we even made parallels to how the animals were feeling during the pandemic. And, like they missed our visitors and like they were missing. And so trying to even give some like other examples for people to connect to as something they loved and were missing was some of the ways that we tried to think about that piece when it came to education.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, just to pick up on that idea, I wonder if, Rachel, you sort of had to deal with any of this in a particular way, given that you host international residencies for artists, and so much of that experience is not only what they get to do and how they get to exchange sort of in the residency, but also the way that your residency is uniquely connected to community too.
Yeah, it was obviously it's every session since the pandemic started has been a little bit different. I think, like I said, we had people here that slowly left and we just kind of let them stay as long as they needed to. We had somebody that was ended up staying almost a month later because San Francisco was hit so hard really quickly. And so he had really nowhere to go. In the summertime, we obviously had canceled the in-person residency and attempted to do a digital one where we do lead like skill build demonstrations for, depending on what the residents are wanting to learn, mold making and crate building and all these things. So we actually ended up both Nick, our residency art technician, and Andy, our new sound tech, like created these online skill build demos for our residents, as well as we have a partnership with the Union for Contemporary Art in Omaha. And so sharing that with their fellows, they have local fellows that are yearly. And just trying to kind of create community that way so that the residents could like meet together after they've watched the skill build demo and interact with our team or, an outside artist. In the fall, we actually brought people back and quarantined them and tested them and then sort of let them out a little bit into the world. And so it kind of felt a little bit normal, but of course the community was completely gone in terms of everyone was still closed. And so we did some, online digital tours of other organizations that we have partnered with, that we continue to partner with. But that, it definitely felt way more specific to Bemis during those 2 months in the fall. And we only had 8 residents. So they really just kind of stuck together and created amazing work. And we just ended up doing videos instead of doing open studios, videos with them where I would interview them about work that they had installed or been working on in their studios. And we released those via IGTV. Meanwhile, also working towards a new way of thinking about the virtual residency again, because we decided to then shut down again for January and not bring people back. And so that, I think, January session was a lot more productive because we had not only those skill build demos, we hired a consultant from Brooklyn to do professional development with our artists, Kristen Becker. And so she did 3 sessions as well as do like open office hours with people. And so just being able to give that experience to the artists, and they could, she used to work in commercial galleries. So really they can kind of come to her with anything. So that was really great. We're continuing those this summer. And as well as the residents then, because they knew we're inviting them back to be in person. Same with summer of 2020 is coming now. Since they knew they were going to see each other in person next year, they started doing like a Friday night Zoom hang. And just like Umi, one of our residents, was like, can I organize this? And we said, sure, we'll give you the Zoom time, of course. And they just would just hang out for a couple hours and make art and talk. And so that, created a community within, just that group of 11 that I think will just solidify those amazing like friendships and possibly collaborations that always tend to happen when you're at Bemis with people. Another thing that we did, which I feel kind of talks to the question that just came up, is we started this program called Public Assembly related to our exhibitions that are on view. So we had new exhibitions open in December and just close, and we enlisted 2 local community facilitators that are creatives to lead discussions about topics that felt relevant to Omaha as well as like the contemporary art world. And they originally were planned to do in person, but of course that didn't happen. So we did them on Zoom, which I think, and we didn't record anything. And we just sort of let them be these sessions where anyone could kind of come and like, either chat in things or, speak out about like, one was about exposure because it was a photography show. One was about like classicism or classic isms. And so it just, that I think, kind of meeting that way was mostly local people, which was really great because we're always trying to really continue to interact with our local community here, like our neighbors. But we definitely had people and residents that came in, that weren't here to interact that way. And I think that's a nice way to sort of continue to do these online discussions where it really is facilitated, but not by a staff member, and obviously just letting it be very open.
All right, Brendan, you are up. I know we have another question coming in.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this wonderful panel. I'm really learning a lot here. Actually, my question has to do with community and audience, which was something that had come up before. But you'll pardon me if I go a bit afield of museums, but for a second to bring it back to this. Article that I read just before the pandemic broke by Emily Bell in The Guardian was about the state of print journalism in the United States. And it's really stuck with me all this time because of how prescient her warning was. The essential conclusion that she reaches is that winners have taken all in print journalism because of the digital disruption stemming back to the 90s. And so today, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, thrive, but at the detriment of local newspapers throughout the country that have really suffered as a result. And while I think she's spot on there, I also want to suggest that that's a cautionary tale that we ought to be thinking about when we think about museums too, because obviously the kinds of back office staff that enable the Times and the Post to do the work that they do are the kinds of things that make it very difficult for the paper in Kansas City to do the same thing. I'm wondering, recognizing what's happened to print journalism over the last 20 years, 20 plus years as a result, what lessons might we take in the museum space and allied cultural organizations to try and stave off something similar happening here, where we're just all looking to the Smithsonian and MoMA to do the programming for the rest of the country?
First of all, I don't think the Smithsonian and the MoMA do the best programming sometimes. So there's one, but I used to say this before the pandemic, and it was, we're not competing against each other, museums and culture. We're competing against Netflix. Well, that's really real now, right? And Hulu and whatever else. I have really been pushing in that, especially all different sizes of museums, is I'm a big believer in back end systems and stuff, but that we need to kind of work together to have some sharing platforms like this, but also put some standardizations in places and have co-collaborating. We didn't need to go meet ArtLens AI. It could have been any museum who has an open access collection can technically, and we designed it that way, can use this. And we could have multiple museums because it's about the art. Because if people are going to an art museum at our place or a cultural organization and they have a connection, they start that relationship when they're in another city, they're going to do that too. So my thing is about, we need to do this together. We need to kind of start not all investing our own into all different platforms and stuff. We need to kind of look at some best practices and help, and the largers that have backbends and the smallers that don't, work together so there's modules that people can plug in. That's my opinion.
I think that there's always this kind of point or tension. It's been part of the tension as a new media and art and technology artist for a long time in our work around the idea that somehow digital was a replacement for the physical, or that it was inherently so disruptive that it sort of would do away kind of with all other sort of before times, whether it be in culture or in museums or in newsrooms. And I think, there's a question about how we're all adapting, and then what are the adaptive advantages for those that are already making those moves, and how does that play with equity in ways that maybe give us an opportunity to center something and people and voices and stories that haven't been centered before. So maybe that's also another way of coming at this conversation is how do we use these technologies to center those who haven't really been centered in the sort of cultural or traditional news spaces. So I'll throw that out there as a provocation as we get ready for another question from Heather coming up soon. So
thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I do want to put a finer point on Jane's response, because this is where I'm spending the most of my time thinking, is really about not just the compression of the media landscape internationally, but also Web 3.0. And how commerce and how consumption is fundamentally going to shift into digital first economies in a way that hasn't happened in 500 years. And I think future-proofing your institution has to accept and acknowledge that. I do think there's still a bit of a well, one, the nonprofit sector is a bit siloed in really understanding its place in economy, because there are billions of dollars flowing into creativity right now, and we're still talking about, can we go get $250,000 from this foundation? And to me, that fundamentally misses like where the world is going, and we're no longer going to be we're no longer important middlemen. And so I think, paying attention to Web 3.0 and not being resistant to that is going to become sort of core to survival. And I know that sounds ominous, but I think it's a huge opportunity. So I just wanted to put a finer point on Jane's comments. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, thanks so much for this panel. I'm so grateful to be able to join. I just heard about it this morning, so I'm glad that I was able to jump in. A question that I have, we've been talking really specifically about our individual programs, and I'm really interested in some of these other ideas that we've been kind of circling around, which is, how does the nonprofit sector adapt after the pandemic in a way? Like, sure, we're going to offer these hybrid programs programmatically. That makes a big difference. I'm interested in hearing how you think you might collaborate differently with peer institutions or with institutions that are completely different from yours. I can speak for us. We started talking to our library friends. We started talking to our Parks District friends a lot differently during the pandemic than we had before, because it was kind of like this everybody rally and work together moment. I think, this question of risk taking, how are we going to help our donors or our funders understand risk taking differently? And how is our risk tolerance going to change because of this situation? So I'm really interested in understanding how you might think that your overall ways of doing business are going to shift after this, if we could look into our crystal ball, or if we're going to just go back to our bureaucratic ways where we're reaching out to very specific donors in a very specific demographic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that topic.
I think one thing that's is the way even these grants that we get, like from all the places, even people sponsoring this talk today and stuff, when they review the grants, I know, because I've also been on the sides of, they're always looking for like open source. Okay, well, if you don't have a developer on your side, who cares that it's open source? That it's AI or AR, or VR, and so then money's given out to multiple organizations and people go and make their thing, and it's kind of a proof of concept or a prototype, sometimes it's a step to going somewhere, but then it dies off. It doesn't get iterated on. It doesn't get shared. I'm a big believer that we need to start having more funding projects that said, no, you come back with 3 museums, and maybe you start with 3 museums actually not that have skill sets and you can do this, but then there needs to be a way that other people can take advantage. Or I think the way we're giving out grants, we don't move the industry to another level. And what each of you, our own organizations are good at are the content. Our content is different. So if we have platforms and different things that are easily used and accessible and not expensive and maintainable, then you can focus on what your organization is all about. So
I would agree with that. And I co-chair a committee for the Association of Science and Technology Centers, and that's an international association of a lot of these types of institutions. And the leadership right now is really talking about what it means to work differently. We have got to address this. We have to have some really hard conversations. We need to take a deep look at ourselves, and we need to say, if we're going to be relevant, if we're going to survive, we can't go back to the way we were doing things. And so that gives me hope that level of conversation is happening at a really high level, and people are having these harder conversations. I think too, there's conversation about how does this come down to the board, because we need to retrain our boards too. I think in terms of what to understand or expect out of what it means to work and to operate. And so that's going to be a learning that we're going to have to navigate. And then I think I'm hopeful that we also just persist with this idea of being adaptive. It's okay to try things differently and to learn new ways, and we need to celebrate that and make that like a really positive thing as a field and as a sector, because that's the way we make it through. That's the way we thrive, and we become the next version of ourselves. So I'm coming from a point of hope right now because of some of those conversations, but we have a lot of work to do. So.
Yeah, I'm super hopeful too. I think a couple of things. I firmly believe that the future is community owned and community driven. And so a lot of our institutions, and I put Fractured Atlas in this as I'm transitioning out, how are we really ceding power to the people who use our services and use our tech products? That open source piece hit me in the heart. Nonprofits trying to fund things that funders require to be open source. So you're really maintaining 2 or 3 different iterations of technology is like, it cuts you off at the kneecaps. And then I also just want to put a plug for that economy piece, which is, always follow who's trying to regulate what. Banks are really trying to regulate cryptocurrency right now and blockchain, because they recognize that we have not changed how we move capital around the world since we were moving people around on ships as slaves. And so they're trying to regulate blockchain because it's going to fundamentally change how we interact with each other digitally. And I think it's going to have just a huge impact on our sector. And I don't mean NFTs. I mean smart contracts. I'm working with some folks who are deep in the NFT space. I support that wholeheartedly. But, things like blockchain, things like decentralization, I'm really pushing Fractured Atlas before I leave to begin to take cryptocurrency. We've got a class of artists right now who have made millions of dollars in the last quarter who would love to spend it with their friends in our sector, but we can't accept those payments. And to me, that's just a huge missed opportunity. So really sort of staying ahead of the curve and thinking, like, what does it look like to do this thing? Like, how to just blow it up and do it completely differently and be as open and equitable as possible.
That's like a great note. And one of my favorite topics is how do we build like the next economy and how is that more inclusive and more just? And I think that some of that means that eventually we have to start talking about how is it also digital and how is it decentralized, and what does that do to how we think about everything in the nonprofit industrial complex, from memberships to actually like being able to sort of think about the way that our education programs that we're building can marry into credentialing and digital badging programs, so that we really are setting students up differently for what that art sort of education experience or science education experiences in these institutions. So I wonder if maybe we could talk a little bit about how you sort of see the future of sort of like digital kind of education systems sort of evolving out of like kind of arts and cultural spaces, whether that be conferences and convenings, to sort of more formal sort of education programs sitting in your institutions.
I will say on the education piece, we have a couple of projects right now. One that I think is really relevant. We're working with Microsoft and with alumni of the Black Panther Party to do very long form storytelling with Microsoft's AI technology. We're going to turn Panthers into holograms, and it'll allow audiences to interview them. We'll have an ancillary curriculum, and I think where we are right now is the technology allows you to do really, really deep storytelling in first voice and first person, where we can essentially capture people's experiences and make that searchable and learnable really easily for pretty much any audience. And so there's that piece. And the second piece is, we're living squarely in probably 150 years of flat screens. And we're on the cusp of going back to doing what we used to, which was, we took media and we handed it to someone and he turned it around and really felt it. And we're on the verge of being able to do that digitally. And to me, that was a missed opportunity the education sector, I think, made over the last year, really not leaning into that. But I think we're at the point in the next 5 years where sort of manipulation and interaction with digital objects is going to be like at the forefront.
Digital is successful when it enhances, not distracts. And we all agree about that. And there was another and it's like over a decade ago, there was always that concern if I had a collection online, no one would come to the museum. And stats show that, you're starting that relationship. It actually drives attendance. It brings people together. So I really believe that, going forward, it's about people and change, leadership, culture, innovation constantly, like, keep, and really, awareness of accessibility in all the ways, accessibility, every way you can think about accessibility. And that's what's going to make this keep bringing in. And to jump off Lauren's thought is, what's those next stages? And I'm just going to do everyone's invited in November, because we are finally doing that scholarly exhibition where the first time ever at a kind of conservative museum, we're going to have 4 of the 6 galleries be digital to help you understand this very complex Cambodian conservation project, sculpture, and travel to where is Cambodia, and to also use mixed reality and really go through the whole life cycle. And it's steps, but yeah, what is that? It's about the storytelling. It's about feeling a connection and seeing yourself. And my last thing is we've been about one voice, but really it's about how everyone can see themselves, and there's multiple voices in all this, what we build.
Other thoughts on the education piece or learning piece and where it goes next, institution or not?
Yeah, there's so much around this, right? I was trying to think of the angle to come at. I do agree. I think we always question ourselves. It should not be technology for technology's sake. Like, it should have a purpose, and it should be making the experience more valuable to the learner. And so I think, especially when it's more of a choice and we're not able to access our buildings or some of these things, I think we will be more critical with ourselves on what should exist digitally and what needs to go back to in person. But I think there's a lot of value to adding to our experiences, enhancing them. We believe in lifelong learning. That's what our institutions are about. And so we should be scaffolding that and providing opportunities for that for our visitors. And I don't think it has to happen in our spaces only. I think we can create ecosystems, and the digital space allows us to do that and do that more intentionally. So, I'm excited about where the future is going to go. And I just think we need to, again, hold ourselves accountable for, is this the right application of the technology in this moment or this opportunity?
Well, it is hard to believe, but we are at the moment of final thoughts. So I'm going to kick things off with kind of a final thought that I have, which is that it seems that, just as things are sort of beginning to sort of possibly return to something that maybe some of us call normal, it would be really important for us to hold on to this idea of what shouldn't be normal that was. How does the digital sort of inform and engage and offer a new layer for how we sort of center a plurality of voices kind of within our institutions, within our partnerships, within the kind of cooperatives and collectives we form. And with that, I'm going to open it up to the rest of our panelists to share their final thoughts as well.
My final thoughts. Thank you for letting me ramble and for the opportunity. Ultimately, I think a lot of the questions and inquiry that's happening here is just the sort of generativity that's going to get, organizations, institutions through. As our world is compressing and changing, I'm excited to have some sort of co-conspirators who are paying attention. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to continuing the conversation, however I can be helpful. You can catch me, I guess should do that. My email address is lauren@crux.black. I'll drop it in the chat, and Instagram and Twitter. We've got lots of cool stuff happening, so would love to stay in touch with folks.
I think this has been really inspiring conversation. I get really energized when I hear from our peers and know that we're in this work together. So I hope that we continue to be overly sharing with each other, and that we continue to learn best practice and really innovate and push our field forward together, because I think that is the way forward. So this is really exciting, and I can put my email in the chat as well.
I kind of thought I did my last minute, so I'm just going to say this was an honor to be with such thoughtful, thought-provoking women. Thank you very much for including me.
Yes, thank you so much for including me. And, I think, final thoughts are really just continuing to think about collaboration for me, and what that entails both locally and then more globally. I feel like something that Bemis has always done in our 40 years is try to push the envelope. And I don't even know if that's still a term to use, but I kind of want to continue to do that. And I think that, this pandemic has given us a little bit of oomph to do that. So I'm excited. And thank you for including me. And I'll also drop my email and hope to see you all IRL maybe at some point.
I also just want to say something locally to our cultural center institutions. These panelists have been amazing. And, with these organizations and what they're doing it's unbelievable sometimes. And I want to remind everyone that it's okay if you're not there where the Cleveland Museum of Art is, because it is amazing what they've done in a short amount of time. That baby steps are okay. Focus on one thing that helps you get to the next level of addressing some type of a digital strategy with your programming. And also remember the strength of your partnering institutions that are here that you can develop joint programming with, who may have other skill sets or may have access to other digital technology that you may not or be expert in. I just want to say that what we've been talking about today is amazing and we can all get there. It is aspirational and it's also real. But for some of us, it might take a little bit longer, and that's okay. And I just want to encourage everyone to, check out the resources that Root of Two has put together from all of our panelists here, because this is a learning environment, and we want to continue this learning community. And it's amazing that everyone here is sharing their email addresses, and I encourage you to reach out to these panelists. There is so much to learn, and maybe they can help guide you down the path to maybe start on that first project, to take a risk. Like Lauren said, do a lot of work without even thinking about it all that much. And there's a lot of power to that. So I just want to thank all of our panelists for participating here. It really was inspirational.
All right, so save the date. And I just want to echo everything that Anne-Marie said, and also to say another huge thank you to Midtown Detroit Inc. as well for their partnership and thought leadership on the digital strategy work with Root of Two. We have another amazing panel coming up soon on June 2nd, and already confirmed. We have Roddy Schock, who's the CEO and Executive Director of iBeam. We have Stephanie Dinkins, who's an amazing artist, who's also an associate professor at Stony Brook, as well as Salome Sega, who's an artist and researcher, as well as a co-director and co-founder of PowerPlant, as well as a Ford Foundation Technology Fellow. So we're really going to be talking and digging in deeply around this idea of what are the aesthetics and ethics of participation, and really trying to, uplift this idea of participatory practices at the heart of where culture is going. So without further ado, I'm just going to say thank you again to our amazing panel. I have enjoyed the time that we had. And I will just say that, we're all going to constantly go back to the shaky handheld camera moment, right? Like, the thing about digital is that you have to start where you are. You're going to iterate and you're going to progress. And then before you know it, there's going to be a new shaky handheld camera moment where it's all game changing again. And we're all going to have to learn and grow. And so I hope we continue to kind of find community together where we can sort of experience this, because no one should go digital alone. So with that, thank you so much from the Transformer series. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah.